Good evening, everyone. We'll give it another minute or so before we begin. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Connecting to the Real World Concept Development in the Preschool Classroom. So before we get started this evening, we just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce ourselves. My name is Deborah Cruz. I am a Quality and Education Coaching Specialist here at the ELC of Broward. I've been in this position for a little over 3 years now, and I do have about 10 years or so in the field of education. I've been a preschool teacher, a toddler teacher. I've taught as well with school-age students. I've been an education director of a center in New York. And on my free time, I just enjoy crafting, watching different movies, traveling, and trying new foods. And I'm going to bring the presentation over to my colleague, Stephanie.
Thank you, Deborah. Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Templin, and I am also a Quality and Education Coaching Specialist here at the ELC, and I've been here for the past about 3.5 years. I'm also very proud to be part of the Broward Educators Learning Academy, BELLA, as well as supporting centers throughout Broward County with technical assistance. I have a little bit over 20 years of experience in this field, and I am a certified class pre-K toddler and infant class observer, as well as a class group coaching / MMCI instructor. And when I'm not giving webinars, I like to travel to Key Largo or play and just hang out with my 3.5-year-old. So thank you for being here, everyone.
Yes, thank you again. And for those who may be new, we're just going to go over some of our housekeeping rules. So you can click on that orange rectangle with the white arrow pointing right, and that is how you'll be able to use your panel throughout the evening. You can also click on that questions triangle on the panel to type in any questions, comments, anything throughout tonight's training. You can feel free to download the handouts now on that little handout triangle. You can feel free to do so now or later on in the presentation. And once you click on that document, it'll open up as a PDF and allow you to download it to your computer. So we have some attendance and certificates, some information about that this evening. Remember that all of the trainings provided are for in-service hours only. For participants, you must complete your post-test as well as your training evaluation survey in order to receive your certificate. So please be prepared to arrive and stay until the end of the training. So, and participants that do arrive after that 15-minute mark, so after 15 minutes in which the training began, unfortunately, you will not be able to receive your in-service hours. Also, in order to be marked as attended, you must log on using your computer, or if you download the GoToWebinar app on your phone. Excuse me. Upon completion of the training, you will be marked as attended in the LMS, so the learning system. you will have to complete your post-test as well as the training evaluation survey, which will be emailed to you with the email address in which you signed up for tonight's training. And when you receive that, please complete both forms. It's really important that both forms are completed in order for you to receive your certificate of attendance. So now that we've gotten all of those logistics out the way, we're just going to talk a little bit now about our learning objectives, what we hope that you take away from tonight's training. We're going to describe the elements of instructional support. Then we'll take a deeper dive into that and really talk about concept development and what that looks like. Afterwards, we're going to discuss how we can include concept development and the different areas of your school day in which it can be applied to. And finally, we're going to have the opportunity to do a bit of reflection and relate those different concept development areas to your own practice. So, just in case you haven't heard of these topics before, we do want to just have that little brief introduction to class. So what is class? Many of you are familiar with it, but it stands for Classroom Assessment Scoring System. So it's an improvement system for teaching, also helps teachers to focus, to measure, and improve those classroom interactions. And interactions is a very big keyword with class. It not only defines teaching quality throughout the lens of interactions, but it provides the ability to measure and to improve those interactions in order to also improve student outcomes. So with instructional support, pre-K class is actually divided into 3 equal parts. We first dive into emotional support, which consists of your positive climate, negative climate, teacher sensitivity, and regard for student perspectives. You move forward to your classroom organization, which includes behavior management, productivity, and instructional learning formats. And then you dive into what we're discussing today, which is part of the instructional support, which consists of concept development, which is our focus this evening, as well as quality of feedback and language modeling. So you may be thinking, okay, we're going to talk about instructional support. What it's going to do is going to look at how we help children to solve problems, to reason, and to think. That's that concept development. When we talk about those ways in which teachers use feedback to expand and deepen skills and knowledge, that's that bit on quality of feedback. And then the portion in which teachers help children to develop more complex language, that is part of language modeling. So those are your 3 areas of that dimension. So why is concept development so tricky, right? The name alone can be a bit confusing, and many times teachers often assume that concept development is about learning a particular concept, but it's actually a lot more than that. It's, more than just relaying facts or information. When effective concept development happens, teachers help children find answers on their own, and they also challenge students to think about the hows and the whys of learning. Concept development teaches teachers to use strategies and question students and help them just think deeply about concepts and ideas and focus their attention on coming up with a solution rather than just getting the correct answer. So with concept development, it is part of these particular indicators. So on the previous slide, you heard me mention that effective concept development is all about encouraging children to develop higher order thinking skills. So you might think of words like analysis and reasoning, all of those why and how questions and deeper thinking questions. You'll also think about creating, so opportunities to brainstorm, to plan, to produce different ideas. Then we'll move over to integration. So how do we make those connections to previous knowledge and previous concepts that children are already familiar with? And then finally, we make those connections to the real world. So how can we really relate the information that we're discussing and make it as a real world application, as well as relate it to the lives of the students in our classroom? So why is it important to promote children's higher order thinking skills? When you support these thinking skills, you help them to generalize knowledge. So allows them to apply what they've learned in one situation to a new situation. They can use information to understand their world, rather than just memorizing facts. They also begin to understand the process of learning, and it makes students become a bit more of active learners. So when you're looking at concept development and the type of interactions they include, it should be things that are initiated by the teacher. And it's focused on that process of learning, not just the right answer, right? It should be intentional. So the teacher uses that intentional approach to tie together ideas and concepts across activities. Not about, remember, just teaching those specific concepts. It's not about a particular concept, but really just that bigger idea, remembering that it's a way of seeing something or an idea. We want our students to just develop more and to think more complex. We want to encourage our students to think as well. And finally, we want to sustain so that children can reach a deeper level of understanding. We want to give them that opportunity to learn so that children are interested and invested in learning. So with that, we bring to you our first poll of the evening, which states, what is concept development? Is it when teachers have children recite just letters and numbers and words? Is it when teachers help children find answers and think about those hows and whys of learning? Is it through rote memorization? Or is it when we are able to redirect misbehavior? So based on those last few slides that we went over, what do we feel concept development is? And Stephanie has already launched that poll. So you can feel free to choose one of these answers and we will discuss the results right after. Okay, so with that, we have a few different answers here. Let me just, okay, so 75% of us did believe concept development is when we have children think about the hows and whys of learning. And that is absolutely correct. With concept development, we really want to strive for students to kind of think out loud and go through that process and have these deeper understanding when they're learning, right? So we actually do not want them to just recite letters and numbers, right? That's just memorization. We want them to understand what they're reading or the numbers that they come across. It's much more higher level thinking. And excuse me, with concept development, it is not about behavior. Again, it's going to really focus on deeper level thinking, deeper level questioning, and things of that matter. So how we help children think about the hows and whys of learning. Okay. So let's look at how we describe concept development by just reviewing those 4 major indicators. It's going to consist of that analysis and reasoning. Remember those hows, those whys. Then focus on creating, planning together, things of that nature. Integration, how do we make those connections? And then as well as those connections to the real world. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Stephanie, and she's going to dive a little bit deeper into those indicators.
All right, thank you, Deborah. So yes, we're going to decode concept development. So we're going to try to recognize and interpret what that is by really taking those areas that Deborah mentioned and understanding each one individually to really discover the underlying meaning of concept development, and really always keeping in mind, if you think concept development, think of the hows and whys of learning. So let's get started. So of course, we're going to begin with that analysis and reasoning that Deborah mentioned at the beginning of our webinar. And it's important to point out that we're not focusing on that rote memorization or being correct about answers. Instead, we're looking for ways for the teachers to use discussions and activities just to encourage thinking and to understand what a child knows and why do they know it and how do they express it. So what the good thing is that analysis and reasoning is a very natural process for children, because if you've been around children, they want to understand everything around them. They want to help solve problems. They want to experiment. They want to compare. And what's great is that there are so many opportunities in the classroom that we can help them do this. So we can help them do this by asking those hows and why questions, as we are providing opportunities for children to problem solve, to predict, to classify and evaluate. And one simple way to think about this idea of analysis and reasoning is really to examining the facts to find the reasons for things based on what we know or what we have experienced in the past. So why do we think the way that we think? Well, it's due to an experience that we've had in the past. So we're trying to make those connections to foster higher level thinking. And then also, children are naturally practicing analysis of reasoning when they're asking those questions, when they're predicting and comparing and evaluating naturally. They're already showing and demonstrating analysis and reasoning, and now it's our opportunity to really get them to focus those ideas and come up with how to express them in meaningful ways. So that's where we come in as adults, because the children need to practice these thinking skills to reach that deeper level and have us model these thinking skills and lead them to this deeper understanding. So what does analysis and reasoning sound like when we're in the classroom? So here are some sentence prompts to really help you keep challenging and supporting children, and to really have a nice picture of what it should sound like in the classroom. We're encouraging the children to develop their thinking skills and lead to deeper understandings of all sorts of concepts, not just the certain concept of the month, but concepts that relate to the real life, to their everyday experiences, to the concepts in your curriculum, to the standards, to anything that they really come across. So when we're talking about analysis and reasoning, we see those hows and whys. Why do you think that? How do we know, or how does that work? And we want to see and hear lots of prediction and experimentation. And that doesn't have to just stay at the science table or during the science opportunities in the classroom. We can predict and experiment through reading activities, through meal times, through many different times. And we always want to find opportunities for comparing and classifying. So simple as saying, what's the difference between the apples and the oranges? Or which ones go together, and let them tell you why they go together. And then they can reach a further understanding of than just understanding the same and different. And then we have problem solving prompts. How could we make it go faster? What would happen if something were to happen? How are we going to figure this out, which is a great one. If they come up with a problem, don't solve it for them. Give them a question to help solve the problem. So how are we going to figure this out? What do we need? And really, we'll get to it, and then we can start the brainstorming process. And then give time to evaluate what's happened. And if anything that we tried in the classroom, was it a good idea or did it not work? And what can we learn from that experience? So we do have these sentence prompts for analysis and reasoning as one of your handouts. So I do recommend you download them or save them to your device because they really do come in handy. They're not always easy to think of on your feet, especially when you're trying to approach interacting with children in a different way to achieve a higher level of understanding. So when we look at asking questions with children, we really want to keep them open-ended because we want to see them apply and problem solve, predict, and create. So when you ask children just simple recall questions or memorization questions, such as, for example, if we were reading The Three Little Pigs and you asked what color the wolf is, that answer doesn't require much thinking for them. So you want to engage children in rich experiences and understand how and why they think the way they think. So instead of asking what color the wolf is, you might ask, how might the three little pigs have built their houses if there were different animals like a fish? So that leads the children to be able to put all sorts of different ideas and connections in place to answer that prompt in their own way. And I love this image in front of us here. We have this hierarchy of questions, and you can see those why and how questions are the richest, and they really lead to the most opportunity for those exchanges, those rich exchanges that will really have the children start to explain their thinking. So why are you moving the car? Why do you think the car rolled so fast? Or even when we apply to social and emotional interactions, we can say, how can we share these markers and have them problem solve for us? That is still analysis of reasoning. That's still concept development. And then we can support these how and why questions with more details with the when, where, and who. And then we can sprinkle in the is, but you can see how the effectiveness of the question diminishes from the top of the tier to the bottom of the tier. So it's really important to make sure we're asking and keeping track of asking them how and why about everything. Like I said, from the content in our curriculum to those interactions between peers, the whys and hows. So let's look at opportunities to promote this higher order thinking. So like I just said, of course, we're going to ask children the how or why something works. So why does this balloon float to the ceiling, but this one sinks to the floor? And have them really explain either what they know, did they see what you filled with the balloon with? Have you had a discussion about different gases like helium and air and oxygen? Or are they going to come up with all these different hypotheses just based on what they know about balloons in their own life experience? And then we're going to set up experiments to test their ideas. And this can be very simple. It does not have to be very complicated when we talk about testing ideas and setting up experiments. It can be simple as bringing out an ice cube and using an ice cube to ponder different questions such as, which ice cube will melt faster, the one in the classroom or the one outside? And just try it and find out, or have the children come up with different places to put the ice cube. And you can even chart their answers and go back and reflect and see what happened and what the hypothesis was and which hypothesis turned out to be the one that occurred. And then we want to always continue to compare and classify items. And this can happen in a very formal setting, such as a small group activity at the table, but this can also be informal. And this can be things that you're already doing. For example, we all love playing in the housekeeping area. So if you have a lot of food that's mixed up and you have 3 different containers, you can ask the children, How could we sort all the food and take their ideas and sort the food through their ideas? Maybe it's cold food versus hot food. Maybe it's vegetables, fruits, and protein. We don't know what they'll come up with, but we can guide them to coming up with ideas that will enhance their learning and demonstrate their knowledge. And we don't want to forget about creativity. So providing those opportunities for the children to be creative and really test their ideas. So if they want to build a marble run, if they saw one in a book or saw one at home, you would ask them questions about what it would look like and what they would need to build. But then you would actually let them go and do it and see what happens. Give them that freedom of creativity to see what happens in the art area, in the science and materials area, in the block area. Give them opportunities to bring some items from one area to another. They might have a really great idea, and just observe and participate with them and ask them about what they're doing and why they're doing, and have them continue to explain that to you so they can understand even further why they are doing what they're doing. So we're talking a lot about questions. So let's apply question prompts and analysis to different reasoning activities. So we're going to promote higher order thinking through analysis and reasoning in everyday tasks that we would see in our classroom. So we're going to go through some specific examples of how to use this analysis and reasoning during activities to help children figure out how things fit together and anticipate what might happen. So we took some common times in a preschool daily schedule to apply this idea and help you relate it to your own classroom. And we're going to start with this, reading a book. And of course, we're going to hear it a lot, but we're going to talk about those why and how questions again. So applying it to a book could be simple as, how do you think the story will end? Or why do you think this character is so sad? And then we want to be promoting that problem solving. So we can have them problem solve if two characters are fighting, and ask them, how could we solve their problem? What might work? And then books allow for plenty of opportunities of prediction and experimentation, such as, what do you think the character will do next? And then you have the opportunity, you can record predictions and you can remember them back at the end of the book and compare them and really have the children discuss them and see which ones they thought would happen, which ones actually happened, and how they felt about that. And then finally, you want to evaluate ideas. And we want to say, what did you think about that book? Maybe they liked it, maybe they didn't, but why? It's okay if you don't like the book, but explain why you don't like the book and what book do you find more interesting? And what part was your favorite part? Even if we don't like the entire book, maybe there was an element of the book that we thought was interesting. So really getting them to evaluate how they feel and what they feel and getting them to explain it to you. So talking about connecting to text, we have a great video that will help us understand how to ask these questions in our classroom and really enhance the children's opportunities for learning during when we have those book reading and story time opportunities. So we're going to start with a little video called Making Text Connections, Reading Strategies. All right, so that was short and sweet, but it really got to the point of how we can really make those connections while reading to our students and to our children through different stories that we provide throughout the day by, again, recalling and connecting that text to themselves. And we need to model this. So we might want to say, this reminds me of, and give an explanation, and then have the children also answer what that reminds them of. So you want to model this type of thinking for them so they can start to understand it and see that that's what the expectation is in the classroom. And then text to text is when you are being able to make those integration connections that we'll talk about later on. But what a wonderful thing about books is that they can go so many different ways, and they have so many reasons that they can have similarities and differences, and can really connect from themes and facts to different social and emotional lessons. And then finally, very important, we're going to talk about connections to the real world later on, but really having that text to the world. So it's important we're making those really important decisions of what text we're going to read to the children and why, because we want to make sure that is there something in there that they can connect to their world? Does this book or story have a relatable theme to the children or experience that they can relate to in some way? Or if this one doesn't, do we have another one that does, so we can give them opportunities for all of that different type of abilities to make those connections. So let's go to the block area. So we have been conducting class observations in Broward County, and I would have to say, I think the housekeeping area is one of the funnest places to watch and observe because teachers are inspired, creative, and love going there. There is one area I have noticed in the last couple months that we are avoiding and we're missing opportunities, which is the block area. So the block area is a great popular time and center time where you can really apply analysis and reasoning in so many ways. So don't let this opportunity pass you by. Really make sure that you are connecting and really enhancing any type of problem solving opportunities that might arise. So you can be observing and say, can you fix that ramp with these blocks? Or have them think about what other materials might you need? Or I want to build a bridge. How can I do that? And have them teach you and problem solve how to build that bridge. And with the blocks, we have so many opportunities for that prediction and experimentation to support concept development. So you can say something as simple as, that tower keeps falling down. Why do you think that? How many blocks can you add before it falls? Or what will happen if we pull this block out? So we can make those opportunities for prediction and experimentation. And then there's also classification and comparison. Naturally, we know we love to compare the height of towers and buildings in the classroom, and we can ask the children, how many more blocks are in your tower than my tower than yours? And how do you know that? And have them explain why they know their tower has more blocks or your tower has more blocks. And evaluation. And going back to their ideas and seeing, did they work? Such as, were you able to fix that ramp? And how did you figure that out? So I would recommend, especially for the block area, which I don't know is as comes as naturally to us as educators. I know it did not for me as well, but really putting these areas and ideas posted in the block area to remember to pose questions to encourage problem solving, prediction, classification, comparison, and evaluation. And remember, all these great things can be happening when the children are building and playing with those cars and ramps and vehicles and building materials. So another great opportunity for analysis and reasoning and concept development in general is snack and meal time, which is a time that sometimes, unfortunately, we see become very quiet, which is not what we're looking for as class observers and class coaches. And we want to see interactions happening all the time, frequently. So even at snack time, we're going to be asking how and why questions. We can problem solve, and we can also have classification and comparison. For example, if there are strawberries in the classroom or someone has brought strawberries to the classroom, you can ask, why do these strawberries have stems? And have the children explain that to you and what they think and how they think that. And pose the problem. Oh, these strawberries have stems. What can we do with the stems? What can we do so we can get them so we're able to eat them? And then classification and comparison. You can say, I like raspberries. How are strawberries and raspberries alike as you're eating raspberries? Or how are they different? Or if you only have strawberries, can we find the biggest strawberry? And how do we know it's the biggest strawberry? So really, when we come to round out analysis and reasoning portion of concept development, it's all about critical thinking. And that is the ability to help us gain a deeper understanding of concepts. That's why we have to help the students build on these critical thinking skills. So it's not enough to ask one prediction question or one problem solving question here or there, or compare in this one portion of the day. You want to really make sure there's a back and forth conversations happening between you and the children that follow an activity. And that's when those interactions can have the most impact. And that's how you keep challenging and supporting them and connecting them to those different concepts and through their thought process. So we're going to move on from analysis and reasoning, and now we're going into the area of concept development, which is called creating. So that's about brainstorming activities, planning, and producing. So we want to encourage the children in the class to really create by giving them opportunities to come up with their own ideas. So rather than really being directed with children, we want to effectively encourage the children to brainstorm, plan, and produce their own products. So when children generate their own ideas and products, they're going to reach a higher level of thinking, and they're going to become more passionate and more involved in what learning is going to become more meaningful. So in front of your screen there, you can see this great image of these children drawing outside. And in this picture, these children are creating drawings of what they think a new building that is being constructed next to their school could possibly look like. So they're outside, there's a building, there's a construction area. So the teacher takes this opportunity to have the children brainstorm, and the children in the picture are creating drawings of what they think this new building is going to look like. And the teacher has this opportunity to prompt them with higher order thinking question statements, such as, I wonder what they are building, and how might we build that with materials in our own classroom, so they can brainstorm idea activities, and then we can plan them and bring them back into the classroom and produce them in some way with different materials. Now, I know this creating idea sounds a little abstract, and I would have to agree with you. So we have a wonderful video that we can really apply creating to our own lives as adults, and learn about creating through that process of brainstorming, planning, and producing. So we're going to watch this class indicator video on creating and see where those connections are. Where is their brainstorming? Where is their planning? And where is their producing? So let's hit play. So after watching that video, I am curious if you can identify times in your classroom recently or in the past where you had activities or opportunities where you gave your children the time to brainstorm or plan something or solve a problem or create something after this type of process. For example, if you allow the children to come up with the idea of the dramatic play area and transforming it, you have them brainstorm different ideas, plan what they need, and have them help execute this transformation of, say, the kitchen family area into a hospital for their dolls and stuffed animals. So I'll give everybody a little bit of think time to kind of think about, where do you have brainstorming or planning or creating in your classroom? I'm sorry you're having some technical difficulties out there, Nicole, with the videos. I'm not sure. I have not tried the videos on the cell phone, but we will problem shoot that for next time. So I could recommend coming in and coming out of the webinar and maybe just reconnecting, but I do not have a great answer for you there. So are there any other opportunities? What about your art area? Do you have opportunities for children to produce process-oriented art? Do you just give them materials and let them think of ideas and create? And what do they create? How do they react when you do that? Or maybe you're thinking right now, there isn't really much time for that in my classroom, or I haven't really focused on that or thought of that in an intentional way. Maybe we've had it once or twice, and maybe you're thinking of opportunities where you can enhance your creating in your classroom. Where are there times that we can brainstorm? Where are there times that the children can plan what they're going to do and then go through with those plans? Yes, it can be as simple as planning and deciding where they're going to go in center time and deciding what they're going to do there, and you following up and saying, tell me about what you have created here during your time in this center. And brainstorming can happen anytime. Yes, let's go back to that example of story time. We can brainstorm the ending of the story, the character's motivations, or what the character will do next, and have the children come up with all those different ideas and brainstorm what they know and apply that knowledge to what they think could or may happen. All right, let's continue on, and let's see what creating sounds like in the classroom. So we have these great sentence prompts again, and this one focuses on creating. Again, it's one of your handouts today. And this brainstorming really happens when your children are encouraged to generate as many responses to a question or solution to a problem. So it's so simple. You can simply bring it to the building area and say, how might you build that? Or in the art area and say, how might you build that? Or let's make a list of all the blank we can think of. Let's make a list of all the ice cream flavors that we can think of, or ice cream flavors that we haven't tried before. And then we can have a planning stage, and we can talk about, let's figure out how we could or would do that. What would we need to produce that? Let's talk about it as a group. Let's get everyone's ideas incorporated. And then finally, let them produce it. So now that we planned an idea, let's make it happen. And let's get started and give them the opportunity to grow and build and produce in a big, large project, such as renovating a dramatic play area, or as simple as building an idea or a sculpture in the art center. So let's take this idea of creating and reflect on it through a poll. And we're going to look for the best creating prompt. There might be some creating prompts in here, but which one do you think is the best creating prompt? So we're going to ask for everyone's participation. I know it's late, but we really do love your feedback in these polls, so we know if we are on our goal with our learning objectives and targets, and we can guide the conversation. So which statement would be the best creating prompt after talking about that brainstorming, planning, and producing stages of those interactions? Would it be today we are making a bridge, or do you want to build something? Or is the best statement, we all want to build a bridge. What items should we collect? So take a moment to think about that. We're going to ask everyone to try and vote. And if you're not able to vote on the screen for some reason, but you have access to your questions box, please chat it in the questions box. We really would like everyone to participate. So which is the best creating prompt? So look at all of them, think carefully, take some think time. We're about 60% voted. So we're going to open up this poll for a few more moments to get the majority of you out there time to answer and to really think about what you think is the best answer. So we don't want to rush your critical thinking skills. Okay, so let's close this poll and see what we believe the best answer is. All right, so we have a split of ideas. So first, we have 4% believing that today we are making a bridge. Now, where I would say that is not the best creating prompt is you're telling them what they are doing and they are not coming up and brainstorming the idea. It's not coming from the children and they're not brainstorming that idea with we're making a bridge. It's limited. Maybe if there was more to it, then I would support that one as the best prompt. But I think it's a little limited just saying we are making a bridge. It's very directive. Remember, this is the opposite of a directive process. And do you want to build something? That is a creating prompt. I'm not going to say it's not, but when we look at what 75% of you chose, I would like to say kudos to you, and I agree with you also in saying that we all want to build a bridge. That means we've all brainstormed this idea of a bridge, and now we're at the planning process and we're saying, what should we collect? So now we can see that there was brainstorming and planning within this prompt. So that is why it would be the best creating prompt, because it's including multiple aspects of creating. So well done, everyone. I know that's a tricky one. That is tricky. It's not an easy idea when you break it down, but we shall persevere with creating with my cute little image right here. So we're going to wrap up creating, and before we move on to our next area of concept development, and remember that building, brainstorming, and planning and these other creative processes are really what can deepen understanding of different concepts. So we want to really facilitate children's creativity and encourage them to use a variety of open-ended materials in different ways. And that can be in multiple different areas of your classroom in multiple different times of day. So for example, children might use the blocks to build a house or a track for a train, but later they might cover up those blocks with paper and use them as cell phones in dramatic play. So when appropriate, take the time to support the children in those brainstorming and planning ideas and let them create something and bring one item to another. If they have a real strong purpose and intention that's going to enhance their engagement and their interactions among each other and among what you have set out for them to explore. So if the children want to build a castle with blocks, help them brainstorm the different parts of the castle, what their castle might look like, then provide them with paper to draw the castle even before they build it. So bring that paper and pencil into your building area and really make that an area where you encourage this brainstorming and planning process, and having them by starting off with what they can build and how are they going to build it, and having them build it with all those great building materials right there for them. And keep in mind when asking children questions, we're going to plan our questions and think about what your children are, where they are developmentally, so you're able to scaffold and support their understanding to further their understanding. You don't want to ask them a question that is too abstract or they're not ready for, or you don't know because you haven't, they don't know because you haven't considered their prior knowledge. Maybe they don't really have experience with what you're asking, so you want to kind of really consider each child individually when you're asking questions. And this is one thing I did as a teacher, and I really recommend it. It really enhanced my teaching, and it enhanced my interactions with my students. Just really adding simple phrases or question starters to your everyday interactions with the children, no matter what time of day, saying, I wonder, or what did you notice when? And just having these little key phrases that you keep sprinkling in through your interactions to really ask the children effective questions to help them explain their thinking and deepen their understanding. And it's really important that we're also giving the children plenty of wait time. And for me, this is definitely a skill I work on as an adult, as a teacher, and as someone who just interacts socially with others, is to really let people process what you're saying, let them think about it before they answer. And the children especially need this wait time. And you might want to give them 5 to 10 seconds, but you want to kind of count it out in your head, because it's a longer time than you think if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I realize it feels like an eternity, but that's what's important, to get someone to be able to make those connections and be able to express those connections. So even when we prompt you in the chat box, in the questions box, we do have to give that think time to allow you to come up with your ideas and then be able to express them and type them out. And then remember, sometimes we ask these really great questions, but we don't really listen for the answers and listen to the children afterwards. So you might have all these great questions planned, but then there's no wait time and you don't really listen, and you move right on to the next idea. So make sure if you ask a question, listen to the students' responses to that question. And one final technique with creating, there is a communication strategy that is it's a double positive reinforcement strategy. It's the yes and method. So the yes is a word of affirmation, and it can make a child feel heard and validated. So it adds to the conversation in a positive way. So you can say, it's like a way of saying, I agree, or you're right. And then you add the word and that enables you to redirect the conversation. So you can validate the children's brainstorming and their ideas. And then you can guide it with the word yes, and then you reinforce it. And then you can take advantage of that conversation because the children have been felt heard and acknowledged. So you say yes, and, because instead of saying yes, but, that would really limit the conversation and limit the children's willingness to express their ideas. It's very similar to improvisation, when you want to always say yes to whatever someone says when you go back and forth in this exchange. If you say no or you deny their idea, it stops the interaction and it stops the connection, and it doesn't give you anywhere to build. So you want to keep everything open. You want to keep your responses open and say yes, and what else do you think? So no matter what the child says, you accept it in this brainstorming process, say yes, and then direct the conversation and say and. Say, yes, I understand that, and we could also X, Y, and Z. So the yes and method. So that really helps the children feel like you accepted their idea, and then you're really directing that conversation by adding your ideas and your guidance by saying and. So we're getting rid of the but and stopping their idea. We're incorporating their idea, we're recognizing their idea, and we're building upon or beyond their idea. So let's reflect on that yes and method. So the yes and method states that no matter what the child says, you accept it and modify the conversation with yes and. So is that true or is that false? The yes and method. So let me run that poll for you. So what do you think? The yes and method states that when the child says what the child says, you accept it and modify the conversation. Yes and. So if you're all brainstorming about bugs and then the child says dog, you say, yes, that is a dog. And we're thinking about more insects. what other insects can we brainstorm together to really get them to go and brainstorm along in the conversation. Oh my goodness, you are all geniuses. I am so proud, Deborah. Look at everyone. They have 100% true. So I am so proud of you all for really understanding and getting 100%. That was the majority of everyone too. That is awesome. Well done. I know it is late at night and probably thinking, yes, and I'm tired and I'm ready for my dinner, but I'm so proud of everyone. So really keeping their focus. So I'm ready to pass it over to Deborah now, and she's going to start us with understanding the area of integration within concept development. So take it away, Deborah.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, so integration is going to be divided up into two parts. So teachers are going to demonstrate effective integration by connecting concepts. So connecting concepts and activities to one another, and also by linking concepts and activities to previous knowledge so that the children can connect these ideas. So it's not just enough to simply mention a topic in passing, but highly effective integration requires teachers to consistently make those connections so that it is ongoing. So you also want to build on children's natural curiosity by drawing upon their everyday experiences and also connecting it to previous knowledge. It's important that teachers carefully observe what is interesting to their students. By building on what children are interested and curious about, teachers support children's learning in a way that's relevant and also that's meaningful to children's everyday experiences in their everyday life, just as us as adults think about when we are really interested or invested in a topic, or we feel that we can relate to a topic, we're much more likely to really understand that and be able to relate to it more. So by integrating that new information with the children, we already know that teachers can help them to gain that deeper understanding. So we talked about how concept development is all about helping children think about those whys and hows of learning and understanding ways in which we can integrate concepts. But first, concepts have to be identified and then clearly and logically linked together. And that is where integration comes into process. Okay, so you might be thinking, though, what does integration really mean? So we prepared an example which states, think about the teacher is having a conversation with her students, and maybe they're talking about the very hungry caterpillar, a story that many of us are familiar with. A teacher might say something like, the hungry caterpillar's cocoon is kind of like he's wrapped up in a snuggly blanket, isn't it? So when you're giving this example, you might want to follow up with additional hints, such as what was he doing while he was inside the cocoon? Or what do you do when you're all wrapped up in a blanket? So, and if those students do need additional assistance, you can feel free to clearly point that out to them. When children do make their own connections, you want to also be sure to repeat them so that everything is really broken down for them. And at the end of the day, we just want children to reach new levels of understanding as a result of those connections. So then you are going to focus on the last indicator, which is connections to the real world. So this is with the support of adult. The support of an adult is when we're able to link or relate information to something that children already know and can understand from their day-to-day life. So this knowledge is going to be much more significant to them as they can apply it to their own experiences outside of the classroom, and it's connecting concepts to children's daily experiences, and it's going to encourage those higher level thinking. So creating connections to the real world through stories. We're going to do so to help children connect concepts from books to their own lives, and also to make learning become more alive for children. And teachers can plan questions that encourage children to connect concepts from the story to their world. So almost think about every book that we read, it's going to have some type of conflict or concept that children are going to be able to relate to or consider in their own lives. So making those real world connections is important, as it just helps them foster a deeper love of learning as well. So we want to encourage children to make those connections. As you're reading stories, these are just prompts or questions that you might also want to ask your students to encourage those connections, right? So you might start off with, how would you feel if this happened to you? Let that child kind of be in place of that character. If this happened in school, what would you do about it? Right, so it now goes to a deeper level. Some of that cause and effect of happening as well. How do you think the character feels? Tell me about a time you felt that way. So here we have the student really analyze the character and then also dig a little deeper and tell them, their own experiences. And have you ever been to a place like this? What was it like? So with that, and thinking about the different stories, we have a poll for you, which says, while reading a story, to make learning relevant to children, it is important for teachers to plan questions that encourage children to, is it A, to recall facts, or is it B, to connect concepts to the real world? And that poll has been launched for you already, so you can feel free to pick one of these two choices. For any any reason that you cannot answer it, you can feel free to type it in the question box as well. Okay, and we'll wait another moment or so. Okay, so 88% of you believes it is to connect the concepts to the real world, and that is exactly correct. Remember, when students can make those connections in stories, they are much more likely to relate to the story. They are more likely to understand it and to develop some higher order thinking skills. So we really want to make sure we make those connections. So let's think about those connections to the real world. We're going to look at the connections to the real world. We're thinking about ways in which we can incorporate our dramatic play area. So with the images before you, you can see that we have children pretending to be outdoors and practicing construction. We have a campsite taking place, students who are pretending to be either doctors or veterinarians. We have an airport situation. We have a young lady who is involved in a bit of pampering. And we also have our young gentleman who is making sandwiches. So we want to make sure when we are thinking about our dramatic play area that we take this as an opportunity to also relate real world experiences in our classroom. So can you think of any ways that you have altered your dramatic play area, or maybe possible ideas that you would love to do in the future? And take this moment now to respond in the chat box or in the question box about ways that you have altered your dramatic play area in order to make those connections. And we'll give everyone a moment to kind of take the opportunity to respond. Again, it could be something that you've already incorporated in your classroom, or maybe an idea that you hope to do in the future. Okay, so someone has said that they have developed a pizza shop. So those are definitely beloved favorites, right? You can have the children pretending to be making pizza, have some students maybe acting as customers, some collecting money, things of that nature. What else? A Publix. I'm sure that is a favorite for many of the students in our community, right? Because they're familiar with it. They may go to Publix often on their own. Again, you can have, maybe make them make a list of items to purchase. Another place, yes, a hair salon, definitely. Right? Have clients, have the hairdresser, maybe they do nails as well. So other aspects of that that environment. So yeah, the zoo, a train station, all of these different areas. I know someone told us earlier too, or in another training, the post office, which I thought was really great. So you have that opportunity to mail out letters, and children can know where the stamp goes on a letter, all those factors, and just really relate it to their real world. So thank you for everyone who wrote in a suggestion or a topic in the question box. So with that, we're going to watch a really quick video, which is going to discuss a bit of those connections within the classroom. Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie, for playing that. And now we're going to just take a look at concept development throughout the day and what that is going to look like when you're thinking about your daily schedule. So in this slide here, we have different times of the day, your transitions, meals, blocks, dramatic play, art time, as well as story time. And of course, your schedule may look a little bit differently. There may be things that are added or removed from your daily schedule. But we wanted to take a look at transitions in particular, right? Because those are going to be those really important part of the day. We're going to be able to incorporate a little bit more of those concept developments. So the statement says, as the children transition from circle time to centers, help children to connect to the letters of their name to print in the classroom. So you can add smaller groups of children with the same letter to identify with the letters together. Another way that you can think about this is maybe you ask students the type of transportation they took. So everyone who took who walked to school, they get to line up first. Maybe then the students who drove in a car line up, then the ones who took a bus, and then any other transportation afterwards. So any times of the day where you can kind of incorporate those learning opportunities is really important. And just consider that when you are doing some of those transitions in your classroom. So ways to help children reach deeper understanding of concepts. We have to focus on the understanding of it, right? So we have to challenge children to think about the hows and the whys of learning. We have to encourage the use of analysis and reasoning skills, something that Stephanie touched upon earlier in the presentation. So you can ask questions that promote thinking, such as, again, how would you feel if this happened to you? Promote exploration of concepts, and also link concepts across activities. So if you're doing maybe a math concept of the number 7, it doesn't have to only be in math. Maybe then we're incorporating when we're in the block area, or when we're building, or in the art area. We want to keep bringing those topics up as many times as possible. We want to make those connections to the real world so that students, they understand it and they can relate it to their real lives. They are much more likely to keep those concepts with them. Also, make sure you're taking that time to plan for concept development. While you're putting together your lesson plan, think about how you're going to be able to use these questions. And of course, encourage children's creativity. Have them be involved in this process. So with that, we have another poll for you. I believe it is our last poll today. And it states, closed-ended questioning is an effective concept development strategy. True or false? It's a bit of a trick question there, where it says that closed-ended questioning is an effective concept development strategy. Think about if that is a true or false statement. Stephanie's going to give you another moment or so. Oh no, and 59% of you were able to get that correct. But I think another 41% was a bit confused by a trick question there. So remember, it says closed-ended. When we're thinking about concept development, in order to be really effective, we want to ask as many open-ended questions as possible. We want to get our students really thinking. We want to push their level of thinking. In order to really do that effectively, those type of questions have to be open-ended. So this is why this statement is false. Okay.
Those true and falses are tricky.
Yes, definitely.
It makes me chuckle,
especially at 8:15 at night.
Absolutely. So I understand. So that I was just feeling that too. I was like, I think I would have gotten that wrong if I didn't think about that extra close right now.
Exactly. Those are always a bit more tricky. But luckily that was our last poll for this evening. And I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Stephanie as she begins the reflection piece for tonight's webinar.
Absolutely. So thank you, Deborah, for all that additional information. And now we're going to reflect together. We're going to provide some scenarios that could happen in your classroom that you can take with you and bring into your classroom. And we're going to reflect and find the little pieces of concept development that can be applied within these scenarios. So our first one that we have focuses on supporting analysis and reasoning. So when we talk about analysis and reasoning, let's bring back what that means. That means those how and why questions, problem solving, prediction and experimentation, classification and comparison. So if we gave these children 6 different balls in one of the centers made from different materials, from different items from the classroom, from different toys, having different textures, what could we do to to inspire them to think about these materials in a new way and get them to really work on their analysis and reasoning skills? What problems could we pose to them? What predictions could they make, or what experiments could they do with these balls? How could you encourage them to classify them, or how would you encourage them to classify them? So we can see that we could say, how do all these balls bounce? Or why do you think they all bounce differently? Or we can have a problem. I have a problem. I want to keep all the balls on the table, but they keep rolling off. Why do you think that is happening? How can we fix that? And then we can have prediction and experiment. We can have, even if you have a series of tubes, which ball do you think will fit and why? Which ball do you think will roll the furthest and fastest? Why or why not? And then classification and experiment. How would they classify and compare these, classify in comparison? How would they classify and compare these balls? How would they use analysis and reasoning? What would they say? Maybe they would do balls smooth versus bumpy, small versus large, soft versus hard, float that don't float, bounce that don't bounce. The possibilities are endless. And then we can see with this activity card here that promotes this scenario that we have extension questions that we can even really continue to enhance this experience with these simple 6 balls and really getting the children to think deeper about the whys and hows of something happens the way it does, such as, why do you think each ball bounced differently? And it really have them think about that. Don't tell them why, but why did they? And then have them compare how the balls bounce on the carpet and the cement and the tile. Take it outside, take it to different areas in the classroom, take it to different areas in the school, and have them share and record the results and see how you extended that activity and how they were able to develop a further understanding of these balls and how they interact with their environment. So let's look at another scenario involving a book called Just How Long a String Can Be and a String, a ball of yarn that we say that we bring into our classroom. So let's imagine that this is our classroom. This is what we've brought in. And when we think about creating, remember that is about that brainstorming, planning, and producing scenario process, just like in that video explaining it through as something as easy to understand as creating a party. So where could we brainstorm? Well, let's look at that ball of yarn. What could we brainstorm about that ball of yarn? What could we do with this ball of yarn? Where could we use it in the classroom? What could it be used for? And this book talks about length, so perhaps the children will talk about what it could be used for is perhaps to measure items in the classroom, and then how could we measure items, and what and how would we do that? And then we actually would do that by cutting it certain lengths and giving it to the children and having them take that yarn and measure it and discover different lengths of different items in the classroom and start comparing and contrasting them and bringing in that analysis and reasoning after this brainstorming and creating process. So now we're going to go to integration and look at a scenario for there.
Thank you, Steph. So yes, with integration, so with the card in front of you, it actually states, how do the seats look different? Right? So a way that you can integrate, remember, a possible way is through story and through text. So let's say a teacher decides that she's going to read the story Jack and the Beanstalk earlier in the day, and then she can make a statement such as, remember in the story, and, and she can then ask, what kind of beans did Jack have? Or how do you think these beans are different? right? Or are they seeds or versus beans and things like that nature, and possibly to connect with previous knowledge, right? Let's say right now we're in the month of October, perhaps you carved pumpkins with your students and you looked at the inside of those seeds. You can then talk about, bring up the seeds that you've had in the past and talk about how they look different from one another. So, definitely a way to integrate knowledge in which students have already discussed in their classroom and then relate it once again to each other. So we have a short video actually. It's exploring roly-polies, and here you're gonna see how that integration takes place with the teacher. So look for any words or phrases that you hear the teacher make that tells you she is attempting to integrate previous knowledge.
Yesterday during small group time, we went outside to look for the roly-polies, remember? Yeah. Where did we go find the roly-polies?
In the grass. It's so wet.
The roly-polies live in the dark, wet, moist areas. How do you know that?
Because it lives under the dirt.
Because it lives under the dirt. Yes, and where it's dark. Today we're going to observe our roly-polies, and we're going to use our senses to find something out. We may use our eyes to look at the roly-polies, or we need to touch them to find out what it feels like. Oh, here's one. That's a real roly-poly. I'm going to pass them out, yes.
There's a lot of them. It tickles.
Does it tickle when you touch it?
Yeah.
So when you pick it up, it tickles?
Oh, my baby one.
Oh, it does tickle. You're right.
My baby one. My baby.
How do you know that that's the baby one?
That one is white.
It's white. Remember when we talked about during small group time that the roly-polies that are born are white and clear?
I loved it.
Are you using your magnifying glass to look at the roly-poly? Oh, sometimes we might find some worms inside the soil. Does the worm look like the roly-poly?
No.
No? What does that worm look like?
Wiggles.
It wiggles? Yours is crawling up.
Okay, so if I was a teacher in that classroom, I might not have been that excited about the worms, but could you recall the statement that the teacher made in which she tried to integrate that previous knowledge? And if anyone recalls it, please feel free to write it in the question box, and we'll see if anyone caught that statement. And yes, she started off with remember when. She actually stated, remember when we talked about it in small group time? So that's definitely a key phrase that you might want to start off your sentences with in order to kind of make those connections and integrate those previous knowledge. So thank you. And then our last scenario is connections to the real world, right? So we have the situation or the scenario in which a teacher is having an activity about Humpty Dumpty, and she's trying to make those connections to the real world with her students. So she has a real egg here. So questions that she might want to ask is, who eats eggs at home? What kind of eggs do you eat? Do you buy the white eggs? Are your eggs brown? How do you like your eggs cooked? What would happen if this egg broke? All of those different questions are just ways in which students can make those connections to that real world. And with this, we're going to show our very last video clip. It is with older students, so keep that in mind. but watch as they plan and relate topics to the real world. Okay, so yes, again, it is with older students, but we love to see them kind of planning out what this, dream playground would look like to them. And with that, Stephanie's going to continue.
Yes, yes, thank you, Deborah. Excuse me. I love that video too. And it was so interesting because the children had they asked those how and why questions about those animals. And look where it took them through a really meaningful experience of problem solving. So I really do enjoy that video. And you can see children, even as young as 4 and 5, problem solving similar troubles in a classroom and coming up with different ideas themselves. So once again, thanks for sharing that video. And let's talk about tonight's achieved learning outcomes. So we talked about the elements of instructional support this evening with Deborah, understanding that it involves concept development as well as quality of feedback, how we use our feedback to support children's understanding, and language modeling, how we support and enhance children's vocabulary and language. And then we looked closer at specifically concept development and what it is. And we really identified it as really talking and having children understand the whys and hows of learning. And then we took you through some different moments where concept development can be applied throughout the day through familiar activities such as story time, block play, as well as meal time or snack time. And then we showed you activities that you can put into your own practice, reflect upon, and relate different areas of concept development to in your own classroom. So now Deborah's going to close us out with our final housekeeping reminder. So I want to just say thank you everyone for your time and attention this evening. And we look forward to seeing you again for another webinar real soon. Have a great evening. Here's Deborah.
Okay, so just again, really quickly, if you have not downloaded tonight's handouts, there are 4 available, so you can feel free to do so now, and then just click on that, and it will show up as a PDF document on your computer screen. Also, remember for certificates and your attendance today, you must have stayed through the entirety of today's webinar, and upon completion of the training, you will have the post-test as well as that training evaluation survey that will be sent to you. You must complete both forms in order to receive your 1.5 in-service training service hours. Just wanted to briefly share our references that we use for tonight's webinar. And of course, we want to take the opportunity to thank you all for being with us this Tuesday evening. So thank you again, and be on the lookout for your email that will be sent later on this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.